Why, hello, everybody. Pull up a seat, grab a beverage and food of your choice. Get ready for 19 inches of Venba. We're going to Respawn Aim Fire, the Kick-Ass Reverent Gaming Podcast from Raffle Idiots. Today, we're going to do a BARF, a backlog accomplishment with Respawn and Friends. We're going to talk about a little game called Venba. Everyone's talking about Venba. We're here, but who's here with Adam, the guest? What? Do I have a lot of energy? Apparently so. First up, hey, Chad, what's going on? It's Chad Michael Lennon.
19 inches of this woman named Venba. I fucking love it.
Good stuff. Also, we have Alex Cozina. Alex, how are you doing?
Hey, hi. How's it going?
Not a lot of energy, but I guess I'll take it. And also joining us.
What do you mean? That's plenty of energy.
Nah. No. Also, we have Luke. Hey, Luke, how's it going?
What's up, y'all?
I don't know if,
it's going well.
Am I allowed to say
Thanks
your
for
full
having
name?
me.
Can I put you on
can,
blast?
Yeah,
like
go ahead.
Your middle name, too?
Do you know my middle name?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
No, Luke, tell everybody about yourself.
Hello. Happy to be here. I'm Luke Lewis. I'm a podcaster, editor, producer, all that kind of stuff. I produce the Lukewarm Games podcast, as well as Crossplay Conversations. Occasionally write about video games. I do a lot of things, but I'm around. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, y'all.
I get one of those stickers. I won it.
You do.
God smiled on me and said, Chad, you get the sticker.
One of these crossplay conversation stickers.
Ooh, very nice. I like it. I like it very much. But this is not talking about stickers. We're not talking about 19 inches. We're talking about Venba.
Every time you say 19 inches, I get really uncomfortable. I just want to put
Thank
where
you.
are we going with this bit?
Thank you, Sony UK, for that amazing tweet. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some basic background information, basically
Set the stage.
Yeah, getting it ready for everybody for
Love
the
it.
19 inches. Venba is a narrative cooking video game developed.
It's never going to not be funny.
It's great. The game was released on July 31st, 2023 for every console. Venba begins in 1988 and follows an immigrant couple settling down in Canada and adjusting their day-to-day lives in the new environment. Players control the titular character Venba, an Indian woman who moves with her husband to Toronto, where they eventually have a son. The game draws heavily from Tamil culture and South Indian cuisine. So basically, it's a narrative sort of a game, but the main gameplay thing is that you cook, and you're cooking these really cool South Indian dishes, and you're going through the story and learning about Venba and what happens in her life and her son's life as well. And again, it came out relatively recently. Scored pretty well. People seem to like it. But before we get to all that, I will say the last thing before I ask you your top level thoughts. The soundtrack, which is the thing that is really cool in this game, apparently is all original. I thought it was just like these are real songs that they just put in the game. Original soundtrack. I would definitely suggest going on, whatever Bandcamp or Spotify or whatever it's on and checking it out because it's very cool. But
You just
all that out of
assuming
the way,
because it's original music that it's only on Bandcamp?
well, the Wikipedia specifically says it's on Bandcamp.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
The first place in which I, heard about this game, like I had heard about it prior to this, but like the first place where I really was exposed to what this game was the PS I Love You XOXO podcast where Greg and company talked about what the game was with one of the developers. And on the podcast, one of the things he revealed is that they were actually able to get one of the original music composers that like wrote those sort of style of songs from back in the day to come back and do one of those style of songs again for this game. So that's really cool.
Awesome.
Yeah. We're going to start at the top of my screen. Chad, give me some thoughts on how you feel about Venba, this video game.
I really enjoyed this little journey with this little boy coming into the world of these two parents who had immigrated to Canada. I enjoyed their story. Did not like the game. I did not like playing the game. But I did appreciate the hour and a half that I spent with it and wish that I had consumed it in some different way.
Did you get a platinum? Did you go for that? Or were you like, I'm good?
See, here's the thing. I didn't enjoy playing it so much that I didn't spend the extra 30 minutes to get the platinum trophy.
Interesting. I want to go with Alex last because I have an idea. Luke, how did you feel about this video game top level?
I really enjoyed it. It's definitely, I'm a sucker for a good narrative experience, and I thought this game had such a cool level of authenticity and representation that I just don't think we're seeing a lot in the space. I also thought it was the perfect length. I played it in about 2 sittings and just really enjoyed my time with it. It didn't overstay its welcome, and I thought, like we have said, the cultural representation, the music, the visuals, I just thought were really something special. So I definitely recommend it.
All right, Alex, how did you feel top level?
Here's the thing. Here's the thing.
Oh
Here we
man,
go. Here we
Leading
go.
up
Strap
to this, we've had a bunch of BARF games that have really not worked out for me over the course of the past 9 months. Back in January, we played Metal Gear Solid 3 as the BARF game for that month, and I thought it pretty enjoyable. I'd already played it previously, several years prior, and so I used this opportunity to go and get the platinum in it, and I thought getting the platinum was a good, enjoyable challenge. I liked returning to that world, and when we eventually get Metal Gear Solid Delta, it'll be good to kind of compare and contrast between the two different versions. Month after that, in February, we had Doom Eternal. Also pretty good, even though with distance, I feel like I actually slightly prefer Doom 2016 over it. Then we got to March, and we were playing Wario Land 3. And man, did I come to actively despise that game the longer it went on. Interesting ideas, good animation. Wario's a really funny character, but I just thought it was like the most laborious and repetitive take on what you could like it just felt like a Metroidvania game without the special sauce. It was just not great. April, we got Stranger Paradise, which kind of was egg on my face because I was actually the one that recommended we play that game. And, that game was not a disaster in the way that some people have made it out to be. But I was disappointed by just kind of how straight it played its batshit premise. We talked about it on the podcast. Like, the first hour or so of that game is a shotgun blast of insanity. And then from there on, it's just very overly serious to a fault. Didn't feel like it fully lived up to its insane potential. May, we played Minute. Minute, decent. Didn't hate it. But ultimately, I just kind of came away from it being like, I feel like the premise of this game, that you die every 60 seconds, is deserving of a better, more fleshed out, more complete experience. Minute very much felt like a game jam game that someone made in 48 hours. It was like, let's just ship it on the store. It's good enough. Again, not bad, but just went away from it just feeling a little bit lacking. June, we played Axiom Verge. That game has a lot of good stuff going for it. It has like great old retro style art, amazing soundtrack, but I just felt like it was a little bit too faithful to the Metroidvania games of old. I feel like it didn't do enough to really kind of advance the genre, and ultimately I just found the process of playing through it, especially towards the end, really kind of infuriating. Also not a great story. And then in July, Moonlighter was selected to be our BARF game for that month, and I was like, man, I'm actually really looking forward to this. I had never heard of Moonlighter before, and I'm all for discovering a hidden gem that I previously had no knowledge of, and that might end up being my least favorite BARF game of the entire year. That game, man, the further it went on, the more it just revealed itself to be just an incredibly repetitive, incredibly disappointing letdown of a roguelike Zelda-like game.
Alex, what did you think of
great at all.
Venba, though?
Here's the thing. Going into this game, I'm like, are we finally going to break the curse? Are we finally going to have a good RAF game for once? A RAF BARF game for once? Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I enjoyed this game.
What a journey.
Isn't necessarily my favorite BARF game of the year so far. Not necessarily. Is it my least favorite game? Not by a long shot. I thought this game was a lot of fun. Have some issues with it that I'm sure we'll get into later on, but overall I enjoyed the couple of hours that I spent completing this game.
I got a question for you.
Yes.
It's been so long since we've sat down and recorded. It's been about a month and a half, I think, minimum. No, not at all. I'm pretty sure on X you were like, the hierarchy of something's about to change, talking about Venba. So that's an interesting tweet to be like, it was pretty good.
I mean,
It's
the
called
thing
hype,
is
Adam.
like,
You got to build hype.
sometimes when you're in the moment and you're just so incredibly happy to finally like be able to play something good, you like don't really consider in your mind, well, where does this actually fall in relation to everything else? And it's just that, again, in January and February we played Metal Gear Solid 3 and Doom Eternal, and it's like, I don't know if I can say with 100% confidence that I would put that game above those two, but it's definitely up there.
Understandable. All right. As for me, I liked it a lot. I had a good time. I did enjoy. So the thing about the gameplay, and with Chad, where like, the gameplay is fine, it's serviceable, but I feel like it's so short, and I enjoyed when I got to do gameplay. I was like, oh, cool. It was perfect. I played it in one sitting, sat down, enjoyed it, enjoyed the story stuff. I liked cooking the food. I was like, oh, this is a fun puzzle. Let me figure this out. But then it was so short and over with. Like, I was never like focusing in on like how tight are these mechanics. Everything felt good to me, especially near the end when it's like you do a blitz of making food. I was into it. I really liked the cooking stuff. Story was cool. And then I was done. I was like, awesome, great. And then I was like, I cannot wait to talk about it on BARF. And hopefully I don't forget what happens until then. So it's a up for me. I would say out of those two January, February games, it's definitely better than one of them. Not better than the other. I'll let you guys decide. But all right, that's cool. It's the top. Is there anything specific people want to get into? I've got one thing. No, Luke,
Sure.
you go ahead and talk. I've been talking.
Oh, no, you're good.
I'm
was just
shutting
gonna Okay. I was just gonna jump in on this conversation of the gameplay because I think it's quite interesting. I feel like I've played several visual novel experiences this year that have very like minimal gameplay. I'm thinking of like Coffee Talk. I played Stray Gods recently. Titles that I overall enjoyed, but to a certain extent, specifically Stray Gods felt like it kind of lacked that level of interactivity to keep me engaged, and I felt like Venba kind of struck a nice balance for me, where, to your point, Adam, I didn't think the gameplay like overstayed its welcome, and I thought it was kind of a nice change of pace, and each sequence was like over before I had a chance to feel like it overstayed its welcome, so just wanted to throw that out there, but I definitely understand, like, I don't know, the narrative game genre is kind of interesting, of like, if you aren't invested in the story or if you aren't invested in the gameplay, it can be like tough to get through a game. But for me, I think both of them worked well together. So
Let me talk about just like
I want to hear more what you think. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll talk about the gripes that I had with it because they're not big, and they're just a
for
couple.
sure.
But I just want to make sure that we can like spend the rest of the time talking about good shit because there's a lot of good here. But my gameplay, I think you're right. It struck a good balance, contrary to like Coffee Talk, which I literally fell asleep during and never finished. That like,
And that's like the vibe of that game, kind of, is it's like so meditative, and this one is
Right.
is different in that way. But yeah.
yeah. So this one, like, it engaged me frequently enough, and also when it was engaging, it again didn't stay around for too long. My two issues, one little issue was that the precision of your pointer using a gamepad was not precise enough. And it at the beginning it was fine when it was like 3 ingredients or 3 things, but then towards the end, like, pick up this spoon and spoon 9 little things into these little pockets, and the spoon was like a sliver, but your hand just kept like moving all over the screen. Like that was buggy and annoying to me. But the thing that really, I'm not a puzzle person. I do not like puzzles. I really don't like logic puzzles. And some of these were getting into logic puzzle, but the thing that really frustrated me and made me just like turn my brain off for this whole experience was that the correct answer could not always be obtained by just thinking it through. Like, it had to have some element of randomness and you had to guess. And the first dish that I realized that was the one where you had the onions and the tomatoes, and you're like, put the onions in first because they have to brown, and put the tomatoes in last
Right.
because then the water cools everything down.
Yeah.
And I was like, cool. It's giving me instructions for 2 things, and there are 9 on the table. And then
Right.
and then I would put like 4 or 5 in. It's like, Mom would never do it in that order. I was like, fuck,
Right.
all right, and do it. Mom would never do it in that. And it's like, I'm done. You can't
I
just
can
keep
see
telling me
that.
that over and over.
Yeah, the only thing I'll argue there is, like, I think that's totally valid to get frustrated there, but I did appreciate, like, how fast it reset you,
Yeah.
and, like, you could quickly, like, throw those 5 ingredients back in once you figured out the order. But yeah, there was definitely a level of trial and error. I did use the hint system a little bit just to, like, it was more about the experience than about solving the puzzle for me, so
That's
maybe that kind of alleviated some of my frustration too, of like, I wasn't really worried about not using the hints for this one. This wasn't like Jonathan Blow's The Witness, where I like want that satisfaction of solving the puzzle, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's another game that I just like. My nightmare. Hate that game.
Fair,
but that's
fair.
exactly. I defaulted to the hint system. It was in that particular
Sure.
dish that I was like, all right, from here on out,
We're
every
using
single
it,
puzzle,
yeah.
I'm doing the hint every single time. And then it became less of, oh, this is an enjoyable little cooking experience for me to figure out, and more of, this is a chore to do with an imprecise pointer tool. And that's when I was like, I don't like the game part of this, but I'm so excited to figure out what happens next to Venba
Sure.
and her family.
I never got seriously stuck in the way you're describing when I played through the game, but I mean, I can definitely sympathize with sort of what you went through. It's sort of difficult, especially when you're trying to actually really precisely describe how you make these dishes. I'd imagine it's probably really difficult to be like, all right, how do we kind of like turn this into a puzzle? And on top of that, also, like, expect players to kind of like be able to kind of catch up and understand like what kinds of spices, what kinds of weird kind of culinary equipment that they might not be familiar with, how that it all kind of fits together on the fly. But truthfully, it's not really something that really got me too much. I didn't really, in fact, I don't think I ever used the hint system.
Damn, you're just
fair
so
enough.
good, Alex. Well, you did have an entire cooking show on your Twitch for like 2 years, so
That is true. That probably helped me out a little bit, actually.
yeah.
So I've got some things, some notes, some positives.
Sure.
'Cause I didn't really, again, this game being an hour and a half makes it really hard to like not like it.
Yeah.
I feel like it's in and done.
For sure.
So I mentioned at the beginning, I love the music. So cool. It's like, all right, time to cook. Let me put on the music from my home. And it's like, all right, I don't know what these words are, and I'm not supposed to because this is just dope music from India. Awesome. I really like, they do it both ways. Spoilers. It's an hour and a half visual novel. When you switch from being Venba to being the son, what's his name? Anyone
Coven.
remember?
Coven? Yeah.
Coven.
That's right, but he goes by Kevin.
Right.
We'll get to that whole thing in a minute. But I like how it's like, okay, she had this cookbook from mom and it's all messed up. So like you're trying, that's like the puzzle part of it. It's like, I'm trying to figure out how to do this. And then when you switch over to him, he's like, fuck, I don't really speak the language anymore. I got to figure out how to do this. And I will say, like, all of the food looks good, man. I was like, I would finish it, especially that one at the beginning when it's like a rocket. It's got steam or whatever.
Yeah.
I was like, that should look dope.
I felt like I
don't-
could smell everything too. Like it was like garlic and ginger in the pan and stuff. And it's just like, oh man, I feel like I'm in the kitchen right now. It was cool.
I'm like, man, they know how to eat. They actually use spices over here. I love it. It's good stuff. And then I will go to my one thing that I think was good, but it was an indictment on Cozy's Homeland. The story I really like. I like the idea of like, hey, we're immigrants. We're trying to have a better life for our family. Like we want our kid to live, have better opportunities than we did. But it's so messed up. And I think this is just the immigrant story, just in general. It's like, all right, we're going to move to Canada. All right, neither one of them can really get a job for like, what, 20 or 30 years? Because it's like, oh, well, you don't really speak our language that well. And he's like, didn't the dad have like a doctorate degree? Or like he had like a real ass degree. The mom was a real ass teacher and just could never
My
get
understanding
jobs.
is that the dad didn't have that degree. Like he was like a trained professional in like poetry and journalism or whatever, but like he
right, he
was
was a
lying
writer.
about that degree on the phone.
That's right.
Because
Yeah.
he was trying to score that job.
But yeah, I just remember it being very difficult for him. And then makes sense because he's a child, but he was like, he doesn't want to eat their food and like wants to go by Kevin instead of what his real name is. Again, he's a kid. I get it. But it's like, oof, that's rough. These Canadian people telling you that you should get rid of that brown stuff, that brown people stuff, and do what we like. I'm like, oh man, rough stuff. And then when they find the dad in after he leaves work in the park and he's like beat up or whatever, and it's like, all right, well, obviously you assume something racially related, but then they stay there and you cut ahead. The kid's in college, dad is dead, and mom is sitting in this country she hates by herself. I'm like, man, this is fucking rough, guys. What is going on here? What's going on, Cozy? You raising your hand?
Yeah, so just a couple of things jumping off of what you just talked
Yeah,
about.
defend
First
Canada.
off,
Let's go.
I mean, that's not even the direction I wanted to go in. If I wanted to defend Canada, I mean, we got Timbits.
That's a whole podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. Timbits, we got poutine, we got Nanaimo bars.
Does that
we got
justify your
great
xenophobia?
foods. We got what else? Twizzlers. I mean, those are American, but we got them as well. We got what else? Panic, I think it's called. It's like a fish thing that the indigenous peoples of the. Anyways, getting back to the game at hand. So first off, I will say, going to the scene where the dad gets beat up in the park, I do appreciate the kind of deft hand with which this game kind of deals with racism. You know, I think that there's a version of this game that would have shown his father actually getting beat up, and I think that showing the implication of what happened, I think, is that much more stronger than if they had actually showed it. But then I also love how, like, clearly his father is, you know, rattled by this experience. He, you know, for the rest of his life wears a mark of what happened, what with his glasses being, you know, partially damaged. But you get the sense that, like, ultimately he was able to kind of move past it. But Kevin is, like, very kind of traumatized by this experience because he witnessed it as a kid when he's not really able to emotionally process a big event like this. And it's kind of what influences him to kind of become the person that he becomes. It's what influences him to be like, I'm going to reject kind of my culture and try to assimilate as much as possible. And I thought that whole through line was really like masterfully done. What else did I want to go
I also
to?
think on that topic of assimilation, I think they handled that conversation really well when Venba and the father were, whose name I forget too. They were trying, like, they were frustrated, like, can't believe he wants to be called Kevin, or that he wants pizza and not, and then, like, they were like, but listen, we came here for a reason. We wanted to have him grow up in Canada, and, like, that comes with the Canadian culture, that comes with more Western things, like, that's part of what we wanted for him. Like, let's let him pick and choose his life. And they said that several times throughout. It's like, this is your life, this is your choice, do whatever you want. It's like, that's a really, like, mature way of handling that thing that I assume happens daily to, you know, millions of families too.
Oh yeah.
Real quick, before I get back to what I knew I wanted to say, the food that I was referring to earlier is bannock, courtesy of the Canadian Encyclopedia.
Perfect.
Bannock is a form of bread that served as a staple in diets for early settlers and fur traders. Most indigenous nations in North America have some version of bannock. And I included a little image. It kind of looks like a little kind of like flat bread thing with seemingly a little bit of salt sprinkled on. Getting back to Venba. Earlier, Adam, you brought up how like the game jumps ahead in time multiple times, and like characters are like increasingly like very grown up, or in some cases dead by the father when these time skips happen. That was actually one of my critiques of this game. Is the game, I would say, doesn't spend enough time just sort of like sitting in the moment and letting us sort of get used to these characters and sort of their current situation. It feels like every chapter we're like jumping ahead like a decade or so, if not more, in terms of time. And playing through it, and I was like, it almost feels like, give me a sec, because I wrote down this exactly like what I thought the first time I played it, right here in my notes. Playing through the game, it almost felt like those beginning of episode recaps that they play at the beginning of some TV episodes, where it's like, we're going to only show you the most relevant portions of the episodes leading up to this one so that you know what you need to know going into this episode. Like, it kind of felt like the game was so laser focused on only the most pivotal moments of these characters' lives, that by the time that I got to the end of it, I was like, oh man, as much as I enjoyed it, I kind of wish that it had like just taken a little bit more time to kind of like smell the roses and just sit in these characters.
Yeah, I think going off of that, I would have played the game if it was a couple hours longer, and I think I would have enjoyed it, but I think there is something to be said for like how emotionally invested in Venba and her family's journey I felt in such a concise amount of time. I feel like I've played games that are 20 plus hours long and felt like I could care less about the main characters and their narrative compared to Venba being 90 minutes, and how much I cared for her and her family by the end there. But yeah, it's all valid points. It's interesting.
Yeah, I do love at the end whenever she's like, I think it's one of the times when you're blitzing and doing a bunch of food stuff. He's like, oh, I'm coming to visit from college because again, he's gone off. He's rejected
and
her.
where she makes the full
fucking
meal.
broke my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he doesn't show up, and I'm like, damn, Venba, it's like the country sucks. She's like, finally, there's stores here. You know, I kind of have a little bit of a relationship with my people here. But it's like he doesn't show up. It's like, ooh, that's. And then when she moves back home, I was like, fucking good for you. Fuck,
Yeah,
I was too.
man. I mean, like, I understand. Again, she's pointed out many times. It's for the kid. He has a better life. That's fine. But as for me, you know, if I'm like a 50-year-old woman, my husband has died. I've given my son a better life. Yo, I'm going home. And she like gets to like teach again and like live her life. So I'm like, I'm glad that she has a happy ending, but also like gave her son the thing that she wanted to all along. But I'm like, thank God you went home, because like it was rough for Venba for a while there. But I'm very happy that it ended up pretty good for her all around. Is there anything else about this video game that you guys want to talk about?
I just, speaking of the screenshot that's on the screen right now, I just really appreciated all of the like little things about Indian culture that I didn't know ahead. I mean, obviously that's part of this game is just like representation and showing like the part of him sleeping in the bed, like how she's like, he wants his own room now and he's only 5, and like we would be sleeping in our parents' bed until we were much older back in India, and I was like, oh, that's something I didn't know. I know my sister did that. Just I thought she was weird because she slept in her parents' bed till like 14. I was like, that's a little old.
That's a little old.
But also at the same time, it's just like, oh, that's like an interesting tidbit I didn't know. And of course, all of the food, almost every single dish that they make in this thing, I was like, I've never heard of this before, but damn, that looks good.
Yeah. My favorite was the biryani from chapter 4. The
it looks
layered
so
thing.
good.
Was it they layered it in the pot or whatever? Is that the
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That was good. That fish
think-
though. I know it's a picture that's in the
gross.
background. I just love cutting a fish.
Fish, nasty.
Oh, man.
Get out of here.
I think this game just deserves so much praise for focusing on food as like a narrative device, as like a cultural point of symbolism. I think it's really cool, and it immediately like made me connect with the game in a way that I didn't expect. And yeah, it was really refreshing. I hope devs see this and they're like, let's get creative, let's celebrate our cultures, and I'd love to play more games in this style, whether it's food focused or not, but just kind of like celebrating a culture, I think is really cool.
Now, I
Yeah.
do have a last question. Well, go ahead. I've got a last question if you got something cozy before that.
Yeah, just a couple of things. I meant to bring this up earlier, but playing through this game, I definitely actually had shades of my own family, because my grandparents on my mother's side, and also on my father's side too, but specifically in the case of my mother's side, they immigrated to Canada from Italy, and it was sort of a similar situation where my grandfather learned how to speak a little bit of French in addition to his Italian, but my grandmother only really spoke Italian until the day she died. And unlike Kevin, my mother really learned how to fluently speak both Italian and English, and also French as well. And she, spent a lot of time learning my grandmother's recipes and kind of learning and retaining her culture as well. Although, because of her current kind of dietary situation, we actually can't recreate a lot of those dishes anymore. So that's sort of an aspect of the kind of like Kazina family tradition that's sort of like had difficulty kind of passing down over time. Kind of a little bit of a downer note there, but I just figured I'd share that as something relevant to my family. Another thing I just want to ask real quick for the group. How did you feel about the pricing on this game? Because I'm not typically someone that gets super aggravated at video games costing a little bit more than normal. I was definitely on the side of Tears of the Kingdom being a-okay, costing $10 more, especially considering just how much content that game had to offer. But this game cost me over $20 Canadian, and I knew what I was getting into. I knew this was not going to be a particularly long experience. I knew this was going to be akin to an indie movie, basically, that I was purchasing for a premium. But I did walk away from it being a little bit can't help but feel like I wish I'd gotten a little bit more bang for my buck for the amount I paid for it.
For our
How much is
listeners,
this game, Chad?
Freedom
Yeah.
dollars, it's $14.99.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, in the US, and then it's also day one Game Pass for
I say for
folks
me, it
that
was
Yeah.
it was great because I
Yeah.
didn't pay anything for it. I was like, awesome. I'm getting my
Yeah,
money's worth on Game Pass playing this awesome, cool indie game.
Yeah, I'm similar boat. I played it via Game Pass as well. I would say if I had paid the $14.99, I think I would have put it in the camp of like purchasing a movie ticket of I'll
Sure.
go see a 90-minute to 2-hour movie experience and pay 15-20 bucks for that ticket. So for me it's worth the experience, but I think if you maybe didn't have the proper like expectations going in, like as long as you know what you're getting into when you're purchasing it, I think you'll enjoy yourself. But if you think this is like a multi-hour replayable experience, then you might
Yeah.
walk away a little disappointed. But as long as you're informed about what you're purchasing, I think it's worth the money.
it's in that weird spot where like if it were $9.99, it'd be absolutely like no
Sure.
question. But the fact that it's $14.99, like that, I still feel like I probably would have paid for it full price. I mean, I
Yeah.
did, but like knowing what I know now, I probably still
Sure.
would have bought it again, just like to support this type of
Yeah,
game and art and
vote
devs
with your
and
wallet
that kind of stuff.
for an experience.
But it is like it's exactly that price that you have to think about it. Like it's not a absolutely sure. Let's go get it right now and suggest it to everyone. It's just like, is it worth it? Yeah, I guess it. Like you have to make that decision. So like it's. I also don't think like $9.99 is a price that is sustainable for probably
Sure.
I don't know, maybe a dozen people who worked on this game. I think I got from the credits. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
Maybe
I feel
it's
like it was
just
worth it for me, but
Maybe it's just my Canadian inflation that's at fault. The
That's
fact
what
that
it
we have
is.
to pay $5 more.
God,
is
freedom
making me
does feel
upset.
good, doesn't it?
I love freedom and hot
Sure it
dogs.
does.
19 inches of Venba. All right, my last question is tough year, really good year, lots of good video games. Luke, you're perfect for being here because you play so many indies. At least that's what I saw at PAX. Jesus Christ.
I do play a lot of indies.
How do we feel about this? I don't think overall game of the year because again, it's an impossible year. But like indie game of the year, do you think this is like a contender at all? Like
I think it's
a
definitely
maybe a
in the
contender.
conversation.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
definitely in the conversation. I
If
will
we're
say
making our
this.
bracket, then it goes somewhere on the bracket. I don't think it makes it close to the top, but it goes somewhere in the bracket.
Mind you, I have not played every single example of this genre to release this year, but I think that it definitely is at the top of the pack when it comes to visual novel style indie games that have released this year. Because between Goodbye Volcano High, which I'll be talking on the episode after this, which is not that bad, but has its issues here and there, and some of the other visual novels that have released this year that I know haven't really done it for people, it seems like Venba is kind of at the top of the pack in that regard. So
Yeah, I would agree. I think for me, it's definitely in the conversation. On our Game of the Year podcast, historically, we always have a lot of subcategories of best narrative game, best cozy game, best like unique experience. And so I think one of those will definitely highlight Venba in some regard, because I definitely think it's worth playing for sure. If you have Game Pass, it's a no-brainer. If you like unique experiences, I think this game's really special, and I do think it's one we'll be talking about years down the road of like, what are unique narrative experiences? Like, I think this will still be in that conversation.
Alex, what do you think was the best cozy game that you ever made for all those KFAF submissions?
oh man, those games.
I think that's a different cozy, but I love it.
The best one was one that actually was never shown off on any of their KFAF streams, because back in the day, Barrett was the one that would vet those games, and he was very particular about games with music in them that he thought would get them copyright striked, and so he made a Metal Gear Solid 3 inspired game. And it was like, I can see if I can try to find it, but anyways, it was like Andy as Snake climbing up the infinitely tall ladder from that one sequence in the middle of the game, and
Love it.
Nick as Colonel Vulcan would show up like from the side of the screen like a Looney Tune character and attempt to electrocute him. And it was really good, but yeah, the problem is that it got
Yeah.
taken down by the Great Wall of Barrett because he was, I think, concerned about the music. Anyways.
Very good. All right, I think that's all we have for Venba. Thank you, Luke, for coming on, hanging out with
Yeah,
us.
happy to be here.
Real quick, let everyone know where they can find you again.
Yeah, for sure. You can find me on socials. I'm at Lukewarm Lewis, and you can check out the Lukewarm Games podcast and Crossplay Conversations.
Lewis is
very
spelled
cool.
Lewis,
Correct.
not the wrong
Correct.
way.
I always say it's the first name way, and then W is the last name. At least like historically, we don't have to have a whole Lewis.
I mean, we
Debacle.
can if you
Yeah,
like to.
We have to.
It's a good name. I like my name. Alliterative, you know. Yes. Sure.
Real quick, before we close out this podcast, the game was Kind of Funny Solid 3, Pop Tart Eater by Cozy Bear. You can find it and play it on itch.io. So go check
This
it out.
thumbnail is very solid, so I'm definitely intrigued.
Love it.
Yeah.
Wild. Thank you guys for joining us. You can find these other two on Respawning Fire. That's it. Time to get out and enjoy your 19 inches of Venba.